Hello, everyone. I am James the Novelist, and this is the LitJames Podcast, where we discuss books and writers of African origin. For our inaugural episode today, we will be discussing Things Fall Apart, a book written in 1958 by a 28-year-old broadcaster. Things Fall Apart has gone to sell more than 30 million copies globally and has been translated into 50 languages. Joining me in the studio today to discuss Things Fall Apart is someone who I believe has read Things Fall Apart more than anyone else in the entire history of the world. Joining me today for our inaugural episode of the LitJames Podcast is someone who I respect a lot, who I've been a follower of for many years. He's a social commentator, he's a literary commentator, and his Facebook page is, I would say, a collection of essays about life, love, and literature. Ikheide. Thank you, Pa, for joining us today.
It's great to be here, and I hope that my inaugural entry brings you good luck. I wish you all the best. This is exciting stuff as we talk about literature changing from the flat one-dimensional to the multi-dimensional of audio, text, video. It's back to the ways of our ancestors, the way it used to be.
Thank you, Pa. So to declare the floor open, we are discussing the epic novel written in 1958 by a 28-year-old broadcaster, Chinua Achebe. What would you, in your own words, say is the plot of Things Fall Apart?
That's a very important question. I think that I like to tell people that Things Fall Apart is life. I was just reading it the other day, and it's a cultural experience. This 28-year-old man just writing about life. It's about how we negotiate change and how oftentimes we fail to negotiate change and we fall off the ramp. It's about our humanity. And that is for me, that is the power of Things Fall Apart. That 50 years from now, you can read it and you're not reading about people drinking palm wine from the scars of their dead enemies. You're not really talking about festivals and things. You're just immersed in what the author was trying to communicate to us. And I think that I tell people that when I was coming to this country about 43 years ago, I think Things Fall Apart, the book, was probably the only book I brought with me. It's it's like a Bible to me, because each time I would read it, something new would come out. And part of the beauty of it is, if you read it, the 28-year-old Achebe was not even thinking about the depth of the book at the time.
No.
He was just writing, and he wrote honestly. And that honesty just shows you could even see his biases in how he writes. Sometimes it's not sufficiently distanced from the book. It have a plot? I don't know. If you were to force me to say it has a plot, I would say, like one white man said, it's about an Igbo farmer and his yams and his yam farm. Now, free me, free pa. But it is more than a mound of yams. It is about our humanity.
Yeah, true. And I think I agree with you. And yes, it's definitely about life. And it's not just about life. It's about life and culture and how they marry each other in taking the past into the present and then trying to see how it goes into the future. So when did you first encounter Things Fall Apart?
That's a great question. So the Things Fall Apart was written in 1958. I think that I was definitely like maybe 12, 13, 14 when I read the book. My father loved books, and he had a cupboard of books. And in that cupboard, there was always something that I hadn't read. It was just really magical. You will go in there and you keep looking. My father was really an autodidact. He didn't study anything particularly. It was mostly entertainment for him. He loved the writers of the African Writers series, Heinemann. And so, T.M. Aluko, One Man, One Wife, One Man, One Machete, Cyprian Ekwensi, Chinua Achebe, and all of those things. He didn't go beyond standard 6. But he was incredibly self-educated. I think part of the draw of those books was there was no other medium. So they really concentrated everything on the pages. The pages would really come alive to you. They had no there was no distraction. It was the book was it, the paper was it, and so you and your imagination, the paper may have been flat, but your imagination made it three-dimensional. But now we have other options. So we don't. My father was a policeman, and he would go to work, and sometimes he would come back with a book.
Yeah. I think we share similar background in that regard. Although I did not read Things Fall Apart until after secondary school, to be honest. I think it was in the first holiday after SS3 that I encountered the book. Clearly, I was aware of it. People had read it. My friends had read it and everything. But yes, my dad was also one of those dads that used to come back home with books that he bought under Ojulegba Bridge.
Yes.
And they were very cheap. So that's how I started reading Animal Farm and the likes, Treasure Island, and cool. Yes. So how many times have you read Things Fall Apart since you were 13? And what would you say has made you reread this book?
I have. Let me just say, I have read the book several times. Just like people read the Bible, I would just be drawn to it. Coming to America in 1982 just was like a paradigm shift. It was a culture shift. Maybe call it a culture shock. Coming from Nigeria and coming into this place that was just a different planet. So the West will just upend everything you were taught about life in Africa. And if you're not flexible, you're just in big trouble because they do things totally differently. Their food tastes different. Their women taste different. Their men taste different. Everything tastes different. Their beer tastes different. And you begin to think about the journey. And part of thinking about the journey was me reaching back for things that were comforting to me. And Things Fall Apart was one of those things that was comforting to me. And I would read it. If I was traveling someplace, I would always have a copy with me. And now it's in my Kindle. Like, you were telling me, you better read this thing before you come here. So I picked it up and I was reading it. It is just one of those books that triumphs over my ADHD. I can be reading it and not go to Facebook. A lot of why I would read this, I will read the book and try to compare what I think about the book now versus what I thought about the characters, and what I think about the characters now versus what I thought about the characters at the time. My notion of patriarchy was different from my notion of patriarchy now. In growing up in Nigeria, we didn't call it patriarchy. The man was in charge. Your father was in charge. Exactly. Life was around your father. Your father was Okonkwo, and you were taught that this was how it was. You didn't even question whether it was right or wrong. Once your father walked into the house, Okonkwo had walked into the house. He wanted food, you got him food. He wanted water, he got him water. Anything he wanted. I would take off my father's shoes once he came from work. And he was very proud of himself. His job was to go get the money and come home and then give us pieces of it, bits of it. And he was a good father, don't get me wrong. Then you come here and you are told, that's patriarchy. How can you do this? And you think about how women were treated in that book. And even now, how women are treated in Nigeria today versus how they treat us in the West. Then you go, wow, that's a paradigm shift. You think, and then the binary nature of life, things that are hidden. You don't hear about LGBTQ plus in the book, right? You don't hear about women's empowerment. It is described as stubbornness. The woman was very stubborn. And the woman will be shot. Ekwefi will be, the second wife was the closest I could think about as a feminist, but they weren't looked at an equal level. So, and then how the book treated Unoka versus how I now think of Unoka. He's my favorite character in the book. If you called me Unoka, you were asking for war. But now it will be an honor for you to call me Unoka because I know now that he was living ahead of his times. I know now that he was the most creative soul in that place. And I know that he lived life on his own terms, but he suffered for it.
Yeah, he did.
And I think that if he had jackpads to America, he would be Wizkid today.
Yeah,
I will be begging for a lot from him.
I share similar sentiments because when I first read the book as well as a 17, 18-year-old, I didn't like Unoka. I thought he was lazy as well.
Yeah.
Okonkwo was, a hero, Izima, the golden daughter, Ekwefi, the interesting wife. Unwoye, interestingly, Okonkwo's first son, I thought he was an intransigent child. But like you said, I feel like Unoka was born way ahead of his time. He probably was born in a different time and a different space because today he probably would be Billie Holiday or he'll be Winehouse. People who just wanted to make music and enjoy life and
and it was a lot of work. Making music was a lot of work, but it was not recognized in the
you have to practice with your flutes and get the right chords and all of that, So he probably would have died of alcoholism, but he would have made an impact musically, at least. Okonkwo have come to almost see within the cloak of toxic masculinity. Clearly there was nothing like that back then, but I think I've come to despise him, because he commits 2 murders and then he kills himself. I think that was cowardly. I think he should have faced the music. There was nothing. He didn't die in the battlefield. He wasn't captured by men of other tribes, and then he killed himself so that he wouldn't be a prisoner or something. He basically ran away from being punished. And Unwoye reminds me of 17, 18-year-old me. I had this cousin who was doing engineering in Unilag, and he was going to finance eventually. But I was trying to get into university then, and my father was either studying medicine or engineering, no other way out. And my cousin then saw the future. He saw that Wall Street was the future. So he used to sow the seed of just try and do any 4-year course, and then get into KPMG or PwC, and then get into Wall Street. So I kind of see that as myself because I didn't have the balls to follow his advice. So I went to study medicine easily. Good boy. But Unwoye he followed his heart. He didn't care what his father wanted. He didn't care that his father thought that, this new culture, this new society that was happening in his hometown was deleterious. So I wonder if you have any, obviously you've talked about your dad, and serving him and all of that. But if you had any personal relationship with any characters like that.
Well, so the character that I most related with, because I saw him in me, was Unoka. I grew up with that generation where you were told what to study. Your father would look at you and say you're going to be a doctor, and then they would take you along those paths, and if you were lucky, you got grade 1, you did this. It didn't really matter if you didn't like the sight of blood. They would just tell you. And I didn't want to study the sciences. I really did not. My father just felt that I could do it, but I was lazy. So he was just going to force me to go. And so that was what happened. I ended up with a degree in biochemistry because my grades were not good enough for medicine. And he said, well, you study biochemistry. When you are out, you will be 20. You can go back and study medicine. But I was miserable, you see. My heart was in the arts. I would go to the campus where they had theater arts, and I would act plays, I would produce plays at the University of Benin Akron campus. And I was happier when studying anything literary, doing the arts and all that. But my father would tell me, I know what your problem is. You just want to be a drunk under that mango tree. You don't want to do anything with your life. And he was right.
Be a kegite.
Yeah, I want to be a kegite because I was a kegite. He says, that's all you want to do. You just want to get drunk and you don't want to do any of these things. But my passions were elsewhere. But to your point regarding Okonkwo, I just want to say that Okonkwo was a child that was born into a war he didn't ask for. Just like Ikemefuna. Yeah, so Okonkwo was born to this guy who could not make a yam tendril grow if his life depended on it. He was born to a guy that the entire village made fun of. And he grew up with certain expectations of what a man should be, how a man should be. And as he was getting rewarded for that masculinity, he was getting emboldened. You remember when he said to one poor chap, "Men are talking.
This meeting is for men.
This meeting is for men." I mean, when he says that, you quickly check yourself. Am I a man? As a reader, you feel like you are being personally attacked. He says, "This meeting is for men." So because he had been raised to believe these things, and he was terribly afraid of ending up like his dad. And that's how it takes a lot of creativity and a lot of courage, maybe sometimes cowardice, to step away from societal expectations.
Mm.
And so with Wonye is the closest I could say that was probably had challenges with his sexuality. If you remember, Okonkwo would be upset with him because he didn't want him to be effeminate.
Yeah.
And nobody talked about it. But you can get, these are the things when I begin to read. It's a stretch, of course. But Wonye did not meet the standards of manhood and masculinity that the father had acquired and had expected. And it frustrated the father a lot. Imagine in modern times now, your child coming to you and saying, if you are heterosexual, if you're straight, along those lines, raised in a Pentecostal, even a traditional church in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Person comes out, your son comes out to you, or your daughter comes out to you. Won't you terrify the father because he just wouldn't do. And he was like, "You are my first son. You are my son. Why would you do this to me? Why wouldn't you be interested in these things?" But Woye was interested in other things. So, but my reading of all of this has become less judgmental than when I was reading it growing up as a man, as a young teenager, and as a man myself in Nigeria. And one thing I want to share on a personal level. I have 4 kids. If you are around me enough, I will brag about them. I really admire them, love them. They're all high flyers. I've got a pediatrician, an attorney, an engineer, and a manager. And so, but I would tell them, do what you want to do, that you love doing. It doesn't matter, because you don't know how terrifying it is to tell a child you are going to be a doctor, and the child is in the science class with everybody else. They are all doing very well, and you are doing poorly. You grow up with anxieties and all of that stuff.
You said earlier about, I was going to come there, but you mentioned it earlier about somewhere in chapter 4 where there was a clans meeting and someone less illustrious than Okonkwo was talking, and Okonkwo had to rebook him and said, "This meeting is for men." He was rebuked also by members of his clan.
And he apologized.
That's not right. And he apologized, But it is quite easy also to see that might have been quite prevalent then, to see men who were less illustrious as women, or to tag them as women. In 2014, released a song called "What It Do," and it featured Olamide. And there's a line in the song where Olamide says, "Àwọn olówó ń sọ̀rọ̀, táníkà lóhùn láì díà." If I go on, tí idea about jáwó, how bad, So I think about these two parallels, Igbo society, late 19th century, Yoruba society, early 21st century. One is in prose, one is in rap music. Is there something about the fact that we are unable to really appreciate people outside of the material wealth that they offer?
In Nigeria today, money is the infrastructure.
Yeah.
If you don't have money, you're just wasting people's time. You can, everywhere you go, once you wake up, it's all about money. It's not your fault. It's just the way it is. I can go into Nigeria with, say, just $2,000 in my back pocket, and that $2,000 lasts me for like a month. I can go anywhere I want, do whatever I want, So money talks today. And they have seen thousands of children go through university and come out with nothing to show for it, with no jobs, So it is, and money is a measure of wealth. Nothing else. Money is a measure of wealth. No other. If you don't have money, nothing. You can solve so many problems easily because suffering is overrated.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Suffering is overrated. So it's just the way it is. It's always been like that, especially in societies where there is no base. So if you look at it in terms of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we are even below the basics. So you cannot afford to think. When I was in Nigeria for 2 months, at some point I was going, why am I here? Let me just go back to Trump's country. At least in my little place, like here, I can think. I don't have to worry about inverter, NEPA, PHCN, water, any of those things. I don't have to worry about the drama of stuff. My pleasures are simple. I don't need to be a millionaire. You understand? I can, it's a privilege to be able to say, I don't need to be a millionaire. I am fine with what I get every month. And that's okay too. You see, but for most Nigerians, that's not true. They are below water all the time. So the influence of money is perhaps exaggerated, but it is, and it comes out in the jokes that people make.
So, in this, our perception of individual worth outside of marital material accumulations, is it an us problem then?
The Umuofia that Achebe painted was a very complex community. They had priests who were highly respected, right? You remember the grove Agbala, where Agbala was, the where they would go. And when they talk about them going into that cave and talking, and when the priest is talking, the priestess is talking to Unoka, you get goosebumps. Because you are
ferocious.
Yeah, it's like you are there. You understand? They had a role that was respected. You understand? The farmers were respected. Even the musicians had their own. So everything had its own, but they had the premium. You're right. They had a premium on people who were wealthy, who could take the Ozo title. But again, it was tied to something organic and spiritual within the Ozo title was a thing of respect. You had to show that you had done something for the society, to the society, for yourself, to yourself and your family, to deserve such a title. And I don't think it was really about money. There were other markers of greatness that gave you access to those titles. This is probably the most intellectual conversation I've had.
I see. So I wanted to move towards modern perception of things fall apart. In the last few years, there's been some discussion from some certain circles about how Achebe was not exposed when he wrote Things Fall Apart. Do you think this is a fair assessment?
What does that even mean? It's not exposed to the white man's ways or what?
I think I'm talking about his writing, maybe on the sentence level. While the book is good per plot, characters, themes, but on a sentence, I think that's my perception.
I don't want to sound dismissive, but a lot of these folks are drunk on MFA philosophies. They go to Iowa and they tell them, this is how you write. Do not say very good, just say good. Do this.
Good.
So they've got Western notions of what a sentence should be. It shouldn't be lush, it shouldn't be dramatic. It shouldn't be this. It's against everything that we... you remember what Achebe said? Be careful about how the Africans see the English language. We intend to do something.
Do not be fooled that we write in the English language. Yes, we intend to do unheard of things
with it. He was quietly defiant about. He just wrote as himself. In fact, I would argue that Achebe, and I wrote this about 10 years ago. I found somebody was now using it in their scholarship without attribution. So if you are reading Things Fall Apart, it's like you are reading in the Igbo language. You understand? It's like you are reading in the Igbo language, but you don't even know it. It so immerses you. You don't even think you are reading in English. Think about it. When you are reading Achebe's books, he wrote it with his blood. He wrote it as a patriarch himself. as a woman oppressing, child oppressing, man demanding everything, patriarch. He did, and then at some point, and he was put under a lot of pressure by progressives that were saying, "Why did you write like this? You never have women lead characters. You never have this. You're always cutting off their necks and doing all of these things. Why can't you?" So he had Things Fall Apart, No Longer Artist, Arrow of God,
Man of the People.
A Man of the People. A Man of the People was just hilarious, brilliant stuff. He wrote this and was released like a couple of weeks before the 1966 coup. Right? Art should be honest. It should be, but I think the artist should be himself. Even when somebody like Ikhide comes and says you are being an asshole about what you wrote, still just be yourself. Don't be dishonest about it.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that, because I asked ChatGPT, are there any writers, American or British, who, while in their 20s, wrote major works of fictions in the 50s or 60s that can be considered classics? And he gave me only 4, in fact 5. One was Flannery O'Connor, Wise Blood. He wrote it at 25. James Baldwin, a debut. He wrote at 28. Go Tell It to the Mountain. William Styron, 26. Lie Down in Darkness. Kingsley Amis, British, 31. Lucky Jim. He wrote it at 1954. Then I asked, is any of this book more profound than Things Fall Apart? And he said, no. So if an unexposed 27-year-old boy who just came out from UI and was working in the Nigerian Podcast Service writes a novel, and 60 years down the line, you are saying he wasn't exposed.
Yeah. So
I don't know what your point is.
Yeah. So let's even interrogate that. What does that even mean? Take James Baldwin. Of all the folks that you've talked about, he was probably the most. He was probably the most exposed of those Westerners.
Yeah, absolutely. He's
but even then,
and all of that.
Yeah, even then, I would argue that every one of them was 1,000 times more insular than Achebe. You have to understand that Achebe was raised in books that were foreign.
Yeah.
He went to UI, right? He went to the University of Ibadan. You think he was learning how to be a masquerade at the University of Ibadan?
No, he was reading Joseph Conrad.
Yes. And then he got upset with Joseph Conrad. All of his life, he was made to read about the other. All of his life, he was made to think about the other. Meanwhile, these other guys that you've talked about, they never, at that time, maybe James Baldwin, they didn't know about Achebe. They didn't know. If we were to show them on the map, show me where Nigeria is, they wouldn't. But we were all in classes, in geography classes. Our geography teachers were beating us up because we could not tell where Saskatchewan was. How many white kids were being beaten up because they could not tell where Ewu, my village, is? When Nigerian thinkers say stuff like this, it exposes them for the shallowness in their soul. Westerners did not write for us. They wrote for who? They wrote for themselves. Yeah. Right? The authors of my childhood did not write for me. They wrote for themselves. But our writers they spend their days writing for the other. In fact, you remember what Achebe said? He wrote children's books because there was no book written for the daughter.
For children, yeah.
So I would argue that Achebe is 1,000 times more exposed than these people that are accusing him of. I mean, how can you read that book and say he was not exposed? Because, to be honest, I am not that exposed. It is me and my dog. Me and my dog and my wife. Yeah, and pounded yam. So I don't, but he was. And the other thing also is, I love your questions because they, to be honest, they are applied literature. They're not, fixated on, minutiae but they talk about applying lessons learned from this book. They did a birthday party for him in DC, and I attended. And they asked him about Things Fall Apart. And at some point he got irritated and he smiled and says, It's not the only book I wrote, And it is true. Some of his best thoughts are in his essays. Many people don't even know that he wrote several volumes of essays.
And what's more interesting is that I think he had the opportunity to have salvaged this kind of thinking that was going to come later on. Because I think the second time I read Things Fall Apart was in my late 20s. And I can't remember, but I think it was the 50th birthday edition. And I think he wrote a preface to the book. And he said something about some structural weaknesses that he encountered when he was reading the book after it was first published. And he was tempted to correct those structural weaknesses before a second edition, but he just decided to let it go. As I wanted to move towards language, for instance, as a concept. Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart has been translated into more than 50 languages globally since it was written 67 years ago. Why don't we have an Igbo version?
Why should we have an Igbo version?
Why should we not?
Why should we? Just tell me why we should have.
Okay, because it was written by an Igbo man who was writing about Igbo culture and society at that period in time. And also because if it has been translated into 50 languages globally, it is only, would I say, normal for the language from which the thoughts in which the book was written from should exist.
So it doesn't bother me that much. First of all, we are built in the oral tradition of our ancestors, right?
Yeah.
But I worry that if you just do it for doing sake, maybe 5 or 10 people will end up buying the book and reading it. The people that will read the book are more likely to, in Igbo, are more likely to want to read it in English. And like I said, what's the utility of it? If you are reading it, it's like you are reading in Igbo. It's just not. But I do think that there is an opportunity here to do what they call an audiobook, or to make it a podcast. Maybe you can take that on and make some money out of it.
I don't want to be accused of cultural appropriation. Yeah. So, still on languages, and I'm looking at the Nobel Prize, for instance, as a case study. Most of the people who have won have written in the quartet of English, French, Spanish, German. There's been a whole lot of other people who have won in other minor languages, Portuguese and co. However, there's a very small group who have won for very unbelievable languages. For instance, Isaac Bashevis Singh won for writing in Yiddish. Orhan Pamuk for Turkish. There's this guy in 1955, I can't remember his name, but he wrote in Icelandic.
Yeah.
And he won the Nobel. So I think of our writers and writing generally from Nigeria, and I wonder, why is it that we are unable to write in our own languages on a lofty level? Because if you look at the two Black Africans who have won the Nobel, they wrote majorly in English.
Yeah.
Why can we not write at a lofty literary level in our native language, such that the book is so good or the writing is so good, it then gets translated into English, for instance, for other people to be able to appreciate?
First of all, the English language is our lingua franca. It's our mother tongue, for good or for bad.
I agree. Yeah.
So we have taken it, we have appropriated it, it is our own. So I don't have any regrets about that. It is what it is. We were the conquered, we were the colonized, and it was forced on us, and we took it, and we are doing really great things with it. A lot of those, so in terms of context, a lot of those authors you have cited, basically, it's the language is read in their cultures. Do you understand? If I was in Italy, there was no English book in the bookstores.
Yeah.
You understand? If you go to their bookstores, it is in their language, and they are reading for pleasures in their language. It's not what we do. Our languages tend to be in the oral tradition. Now, some of them translate very well into the written, Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo. When I did my youth corps in the north, it was possible to study Hausa from a book, but it's not something we do universally. Would you agree? I mean, the book came to us. We didn't,
Yeah.
unlike this other. I mean, and a lot of times they would write these things in the languages, and then they will be English. Even the African child was in French, right?
Yeah.
But it was in French in an African country. An African was writing in French, and then they converted it from the French to English. So it's complicated.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that technology now offers us to go back to the oral tradition of our forefathers and foremothers. To be honest, record a lot of these things. And time is of the essence. We are losing a lot of people. We have lost a lot of oral history because we've been so focused on the book. We have not thought about recording stuff. It should be about content, not about the medium. And because we have been so focused on the book as a medium, we have lost a lot of opportunities to record stuff. There is nothing to be ashamed of in our oral traditions.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I'll take that personally. So I wanted to talk about Achebe himself, the man, and his ending. If you look at the end of Things Fall Apart, clearly the narrator is talking about how shocked this white man is about the culture of these people that he has just discovered. So the last sentence in the book is the pacification of the primitive people of the lower Niger.
Yeah.
Very academic ending.
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever been another closing sentence in Nigerian fiction that has such an academic ending.
Yeah.
But then I think of Achebe's ending as well in Boston.
Yeah.
In faraway Oyibo man land. And for someone who wrote a book in opposition to how Joseph Conrad portrayed Black people in The Heart of Darkness, for someone who wrote a book in opposition to how Joyce Carey portrayed Black people in Mr. Johnson, to then spend the last quarter of his life in the same Oyibo land of the people who portrayed him that way, having written something to oppose their view of him, can we not say that Joseph Conrad won?
Well, no. I would probably say that Achebe won by conquering the hearts and minds of people in the West, by coming over here and saying there's another world. There's another world out there that you're not aware of. But I will teach you, I will read to you just the way the writers of your past read to me and read to my children. And that's what he did. He was revered. He was revered in Boston. He was revered in the United States. I remember in 2008, how these white folks would just kneel in front of him like they were seeing a god. They can do too much sometimes, but they were genuinely just in awe of this guy, and I just want to publicly say, people like Shoyinka, people like Achebe, Gabriel Okara, Ngugi, they gave of themselves to the West. The West saw the world through those guys, Buchi and Mecheta, and they were not fooling around. They were not begging to be published or anything. They were just talking, writing, speaking, doing things on their own terms, and people listened. It was they were expatriates on long-term loan to the West, and they did a great job. Now, I hear you. I think that it is the tragedy of our lives that it appears that we are the conquered. If Achebe had not come to the West when he had that accident, he'd have been long dead.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Yeah, he came, and they found him a place, built him a place, and made him comfortable. And in return, he taught them. I mean, it wasn't an act of charity. It was they were not being altruistic. They knew they knew of his value, and they were willing to pay for it. And that's what happened. Those folks are different from this generation of me writers. This new generation of MFA graduates that just want to write about daffodils and lily white snows and all that. It's different from that generation, you understand? And I'm not being dismissive of them, but
Yeah.
there was a tribe of warriors that really spoke truth to white folks, and on balance, I think they did a great job. And I'm sure this is not what you were expecting me to say, but I don't think it's always. I think at least with literature,
Yeah.
for that generation, it was a symbiotic relationship. But it's hard to see.
Okay.
It's hard to see. Because all we see is them loudly taking care of these folks. We don't think about the fact that these folks are not being taken care of for nothing. They do a lot of work.
Yeah.
Teaching is hard work. Storytelling is hard work. You know.
Okay. Okay, I'll let that rest.
No, don't let it rest. If you still want to talk about it, I'm here.
No. It's because the reason is because it felt like because he only visited Nigeria about 2 or 3 times in those last
once
23 years of his
he was
life.
very sick. I mean, he had
he was in a wheelchair.
He was in a wheelchair, and it's a lot of those places in Nigeria are not ADA compliant. You come out, it's very undignified. You come out of the plane, and they're just carrying you like you're an animal.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, he could travel anywhere he wanted in this country because they'd spent a lot of money on making this things, ADA compliant. My whole career was in public education in the United States for 31 years. And we would have joked that if we were to take the Nigerians out of the classroom, the GPA would drop drastically of America. They're always getting A's, But then you go home to Nigeria and you go, is this country that these people came from? It doesn't look like a very intelligent space.
Yeah.
It's beyond literature. And so America, the West treats these artists as gems, special gems, and they will pay anything to get them. You look at somebody like Professor Shoyinka, and you compare the enormity of his personal achievement to the fact that this same guy does not necessarily see anything wrong with what is going on in Aso Rock. It's it's all a mess. It's just a mess that we can talk about, maybe with somebody else. Why are things the way they are? And some of it has to do with the fact that colonialism did a number on us.
Absolutely.
We are different people, different culture, different values and stuff.
Yeah. So back to that quote about let no one be fooled that we might write in English language, for we intend to do unheard of things from it. It's from a 1975 essay that Achebe wrote. Can't remember the title now. I think of that quote a lot. It's a very profound statement, but I also see it as a form of prophecy. And since Achebe, clearly, we've had some very good writers, the obscure Ben Okri, no doubt, Chimamanda, has dazzled the world to almost celebrity status. But I wanted to talk about Chigozie Obioma, and his writing, and the ambitious nature of his writing, and the technique, the style, that he employs, especially in his second book, An Orchestra of Minorities. It's not just this plot or the story. It's just about how gorgeously written many of the sentences are. You almost want to lick the pages. And I wonder if we can say that Achebe's prophecy has come true in Chigozie Obioma's writing, or do we still have to look forward to see if there's other people who are going to do unheard of things with the English language?
I think that Chigozie Obioma is probably Africa's best writer.
Yeah.
Period. Head and shoulders above every living African writer. Chigozie Obioma is. Tejuko is brilliant. Don't get me wrong. But when I talk about the use of language, when I talk about rigor, intellectual depth, when I talk about passion, I talk about
core literature.
When I talk about honesty of the art.
Yeah, I agree.
Chigozie Obioma beats everybody, hands down. I think he's underrated.
Okay. All right. So before I diverge a little towards some other off topic, still around TFA anyways. Things Fall Apart was not the first work of fiction written by any African.
Yeah.
In fact, it's now among the first 10 works of fiction written by any African.
Yeah.
Within Nigeria, it's now among the first 5. Dio Fagunwa wrote Boju Ode Ninu Igbo Ilu Rumole 20 years before Things Fall Apart. Amos Tutuola wrote The Palm Wine Drinkard. You know, many people did not know this, but Cyprian Ekwensi wrote People of the City some years before Things Fall Apart as well. You know, so there's many books before Achebe wrote Things Fall Apart. However, Things Fall Apart earned Achebe Father of Modern African Literature.
Yeah.
A title, or rather an honor, that he openly and persistently declined. What is it about Things Fall Apart that earned him that title that the people and 15 people who wrote books before him couldn't bag?
Well, it was not Things Fall Apart that earned him that title. It was his work, his consistent work, that earned him the title. I mean, it was not called Father of African Literature immediately Things Fall Apart was published and it became popular.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, so over time, because of his work, I mean, he was really very activist in literature. He really believed in literacy, in writing. And he helped market African literature. I mean, he was very involved with the AWS, the Heinemann series of, and Soyinka didn't want to be part of any of that stuff. So I don't think that it is fair to say that that because people wrote books, that it is the first person that wrote a book that should be doesn't make, from my perspective, doesn't make sense. I mean, it was the amount of work that he put into. You remember there was Onitsha Market Literature. If you've not heard of it, go and just Google it. There was a huge market of writing, ferocious writing, called Onitsha Market Literature. And nobody wanted to talk about it. But a lot of people, there were pamphlets. Veronica, My Daughter by Ogali, how to write letters to a woman so that the woman will fall in love with you. That was would be the title. And so they were sold, they were called Onitsha Market Literature because they were sold in the markets in the East, and they labeled them Onitsha Market Literature. But some of them became very important works, and they were studied in the West. Their names never show up because they were considered second class to people like Achebe. But even within the Achebe's group, Cyprian Ekwensi was considered second class too.
Yeah,
yes. I mean,
literary fiction.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Read Cyprian Ekwensi's Burning Grass. How would you call that popular fiction? I mean, there are Chukwuemeka Ike. Do you remember Chukwuemeka Ike?
Yeah, the Toad Supper.
The Toast for Supper. The Potter's Wheel.
Oh, that's such a good book.
Potter's Wheel.
That's such a good book.
Look, in terms of readership, he's one of the top four or five most important writers ever in the history of Nigeria.
Yeah.
But they all died unsung. But The Potter's Wheel is, after Things Fall Apart, is one of those books that impacted me greatly. No one has written about campus life more than Chukwuemeka Ike.
Until Fine Boys.
Fine Boys, yes. Fine Boy. But what's his name?
Egosa
Emaswe did a great job with Fine Boys. But
oh, beauty, absolute beauty.
Beautiful. But you cannot compare that one book to the two or three that the output.
Chukwuemeka Ike wrote. Yeah.
But you are right. Egosa Emaswe has that niche of having done that one. I tell you that there has to be a proper historicizing of the path of literature. I write, and I don't see any reason to give my work to a literary journal. Why? When I can go to Medium or Substack.
Yeah, Substack.
Yeah, why should? What does your journal do for me? I'll be bragging that I was published in your journal? No. I can go to any of this. I can even create my own blog site as I have.
Blog, yeah.
So technology is redefining these things, and we shouldn't be in denial about it.
That's good. Thank you very much. That was quite extensive.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I talk too much.
Yeah. So I wanted to move towards media generally.
Yes.
And literature. Okay. So if you are quite familiar with British film space, every 20 or so years, they remake Pride and Prejudice. There was a 95 one, there was a 2005 one with Keira Knightley, and there's now a 2026 one that interestingly stars Daryl McCormack, a half Nigerian, half Irish actor who plays Mr. Wickham. Across the pond, they have The Great Gatsby that has been made into 4 or 5 different movies over the last 70, 80 years. So I think about Things Fall Apart, and I think of when we last made something onto this TV production of it. And it was in the early 90s, Okonkwo was played by Peter Doce. There was Sam Loco in it. There was Justice Esiri as well. And we all loved it growing up. However, since then, looking into the late 90s, early 2000s, Nollywood has sort of flowered or bloomed or boomed, And interestingly, the guys who were at the helm of affairs, the major producers in the late 90s, early 2000s, were mostly of Igbo extraction. Teko Benson, Amaka Igwe, Zebe Jiro, Chikwe Jiro, and all of that. Why is it that until two diasporan West Africans in David Oyelowo and Idris Elba decided to take on the mantle, we couldn't bring Things Fall Apart to screen?
Well, it's a great question. I think it's about our priorities. And I think that our tendency to prioritize personal achievements or personal agenda over visionary community achievements has compromised us as a people. And I think also, to be quite honest, I always thought that if we had a thinking government, they would throw a lot of money into the arts. Sometimes these things have to be expensed.
Yeah.
I dream of a Things Fall Apart movie in Igbo with English subtitles. And we've got the artists. It's just, we've got the artists. They're all over the place on Nollywood. I mean, all these content creators. I've seen, if you follow these content creators, most of them that are either Igbo or Yoruba, just brilliant young people. When you look at what African Americans have done with the arts and culture, how they have basically influenced the world with muscle, with their arts and culture, needs to be studied.
But is it not proximity to whiteness that has enabled them to flourish like that?
Can we be even more proximate to white people than this? We even cry louder than the bereaved compared to them, Yeah.
I see. And it's interesting that you said that, if the film should be made, it should be made in Igbo and then translated into English. Because some years ago, one of the reasons why Genevieve's movie Lionheart was rejected at the Oscars was because for best foreign or best international film was because it was mostly done in English. And for you to be able to enter that category, the film had to have been done in a language outside English. So that's actually a very valid point. So I wanted to move to branding.
Yeah.
Every now and then, if you go to any random British city, there is a pub named after Shakespeare. If you are on a train, you can see somebody carrying a Thomas Hardy tote bag. If you go anywhere, if you go to Winchester, for instance, there's an entire Jane Austen museum, and they have like a Jane Austen month.
Yes.
I think it's the whole of September or so. In the US, you could just randomly see somebody wearing a Great Gatsby t-shirt or a Moby Dick hat. Just somehow they've been able to penetrate pop culture with their literature.
Yes.
I understand that there is a Things Fall Apart festival that happens in Umuahia or so every year. But I've spent considerable amount of time in different cities in the eastern part of Nigeria. Never did I come across an Okonkwo restaurant or a Things Fall Apart beer parlor. or never did I see somebody wearing an Achebe t-shirt or something to help us see that, literature or the greatness of Things Fall Apart has penetrated or has permeated modern culture. Why are we unable to tap into this potential revenue generating machine?
So I was in Nigeria for 2 months, from July 18th to September the 23rd of last year. And I went to places you would call, I guess, places of art, touristy places. I went to Badagry. Badagry was just a letdown, it was a shabby place, but it was a lot of opportunities I could see for revenue for tourism because so much that happened there. But you could see that, there's not a whole lot of work that is being put in to attract people, to make it a safe and warm, enjoyable space. They almost need like public-private partnerships. The public partners would take care of the ambience, the curb appeal, clean roads, clean motorable roads, greenery, infrastructure, light, water to be able to sustain an attractive tourism industry. I went to the National Theatre that is now rightfully named after Professor Wole Soyinka.
Yeah, deservedly, yeah.
Yeah, but they say I didn't know that the place was closed at the time for renovation. And I don't even know what the programming will look like in the 21st century. Who goes to the theaters? What do they do there? And so on and so forth. But we went there. It's just filthy, trying to get to the place. It's not even safe looking. So then I went to this hangout in the island where writers, I've forgotten the name, Freedom Park,
Okay.
they are doing some good work. If I had money, I would just give them a lot of money to do even more stuff. That's one area I wish the government would just give them. Just put it in the budget, $20 million every year. Let them do good stuff with it. Throw money in there. But if we go there, our anyhowness is in a full view. But you see that they're trying to do work. I think also that we don't have to do certain things because other people are doing it. One thing we can do is to say, how do we live our lives? And how do we incorporate the arts into how we live our lives? If you don't do that, it's like water and oil.
Yeah, definitely.
But the first thing I would say is the infrastructure does not support a robust atmosphere for tourism and stuff. If there is a multi-year strategic plan for that country, it is in somebody's cabinet and it's not being studied. But we need a lot of work, not just talking. We need a lot of work. I'm not honest. We're not courageous enough to say certain things have to be done in order for us to get to the vision that you're talking about. But that's another. We are waiting for Donald Trump to come save us from 100 churches that are being burnt down every day, every month.
Good that you mentioned Donald Trump, because my next question sort of directly links towards him and his policies.
Yes.
I was looking at Things Fall Apart with modern lenses, and how Okonkwo saw the white men as immigrants, in my opinion. Because many people like to think of Things Fall Apart as a work of tragedy. But I think it's more of a romance of the past and the present, and also a romance of the present and the future, which we later find out in the other parts of the African trilogy. However, I think more importantly that Things Fall Apart is an immigration novel. Okay, and I think Okonkwo rightly does not want the infiltration of his ways of life by these people. I think of Donald Trump and ICE, and all these anti-immigration sentiments and waves globally. Can we say that people who are opposed to immigration in the West today are all Okonkwos?
Yes. And they are probably worse than Okonkwo's because, like you rightly pointed out, life is about change and about movement, right?
Yeah.
Movement. There's always been movement. The only reason these folks are upset is the color of the movement. Black and brown movement. This country was plundered by white folks who came from the old country, and they killed off as many of the natives that they could find and put the rest of them in reservations. And for a long time, the movement was white, except for our people that they brought during the Middle Passage to come and help with the cotton fields and the plantations and all of that stuff. Yeah, as long as they were slaves and they were put in their shoes, it was not a problem. It was just the other day that black folks could vote in this country. So you've forgotten about that.
It was 60s.
Yes. So it was like 500 years ago. But then one day, of course, you had these wars in Central America, South America, that America caused.
Yeah.
And people were fleeing. One morning we woke up in the 80s and the place was all Latinos. And they're just different, different people, different cultures, everything. And then that became, suddenly, we began to hear things being said, terrible things being said about us in code. And this is what they have always wanted to do. See, this is what they've always wanted to do, to tell us that we are not wanted here. We can go back. They, unlike Okonkwo, they have the force of the state behind them. They can kill as many of us as possible. They can deport as many of us as possible. And a lot of this is performative. They are trying to shock us into compliance. They are doing. You are going to be hiding in the hedges of America. Norman Rockwell will come back and paint pictures of America, and you will not be in it because you will be hiding in the hedges. And it's already working. When my bell rings, I look at the Ring app to see if it's ICE, if it is a white person. Unlike Okonkwo, they have the means to make us, at least in the short to intermediate run, behave ourselves. So there is nothing, nobody knows the beginning of humanity. But what we know is that humanity has always swirled around, moving from place to place like cattle. Yeah.
I see. So before we go, Pa, should we read Things Fall Apart in 2026 and why?
I think everybody should read Things Fall Apart in 2026, especially in the era of Trump. I think that all writers, at least, should read Things Fall Apart because it is a defiant ode to originality, to how to be yourself as an artist, how not to be beholden to expectations about how things should be written. It is also an ode to a time when the book really, really entertained us. It fosters pride in me when I think about it, when I read it, as I started reading it again a couple of days ago. And I don't understand how we lost the self-confidence to continue to write about us in that way. And when not only Things Fall Apart, Arrow of God, No Longer at Ease, A Man of the People, even Antilles of the Savannah, and There Was a Country, and then of course his Army of Essays. But yeah, Things Fall Apart. One other thing that I liked about Achebe's book was how it helped me bond with my dad.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's profound.
Yeah.
So this is where we wrap it up for today, Pa.
I want to thank you for finding me worthy of spending hours with to talk about my obsession, which is narrative, storytelling. I think that narrative is everything. Storytelling is everything. I made a comfortable living, not as a writer, but as someone who prepared narrative every day, prepared stories every day as a civil servant to shape the society I lived in, to shape opinions and all of that stuff. And I think that it is comforting to me that people like you think about the power of narrative. And in your questions, it is clear to me that you've thought a lot about what narrative should be and how it should be. If we are not, so we've got to seize the narrative, and I thank you for doing your part in reminding us of the need to seize the narrative from the hunter. We are lions, and we should not behave like conquered lions. We should behave like, fighting lions with stories to tell, because we have stories to tell.
Thank you very much, Pa. And on that note, we round up today's first episode of the LitJames Podcast. Thank you all, and see you at the next episode. Thank you all for listening to the LitJames Podcast. I hope you learned one or two things today and you found it exciting enough. Join me next time as we discuss another book, another writer of African origin. And if you do have any book or any writer that you would like us to talk about, I'm more than happy to accept your queries. Thank you.